Welcome everyone to a new episode of Stats and Scheme with Tej Seth and Syed. We're here with a new episode where we've had football on Thursday, football on Friday, football on Saturday for some, football on Sunday, and football on Monday, Shawn. So much to talk about. We're going to have 3 topics today. Is there anything interesting you want to bring up first before we jump in?
Hey, Ted, you're just rushing into this. I mean, as you said, 5 days of football in a row. I want to check in on you. It's like were you just consuming just like buttery foods the whole entire week? Like how'd you make it through? I know you said Saturday was football for some. Obviously, Ted, you're a Michigan alum. Big day for you and everyone else there. How are you getting through this right now?
Both health wise and just like strain on my eyes. I was gassed by the time we got to Sunday night, but it again, like I think Kevin Clark tweeted about this yesterday. You brought this up to me multiple times. We would do a lot of stuff for these games in March and May when we're sitting there with other sports on and not football. So, I appreciate it. I enjoyed every minute of it basically. How about you? How did your Thanksgiving weekend and with 5 straight days of football look?
Yeah, it was really good. I feel the same. You were actually the first one to say to me, like I think it was early or in the middle of last year, like, hey, we are going to miss these types of games. So I appreciate that about you. And obviously starts off on Thursday. I think we had a real good one with Packers Lions. Good ones for some. I think just like we have to talk about Jordan Love. I think we've been like we'll send each other a play here and there about Jordan Love. In week one, we saw. I mean, LaFleur has really been cooking there. I think in that week one game, they had multiple explosive plays. They have a bunch of great screens, and he does a great job in LaFleur just manufacturing things. Like Jordan Love is in the bottom quarter of just pure dropbacks, which removes RPOs, it removes play action, it removes screens. And truthfully, I mean, who would want to be in the top percent of pure dropbacks? You want to make things not just like, oh, like your quarterback can't do certain things, but give them some easy buttons, give them easier looks. And it feels like now Jordan Love is more trusting of that offense a little bit, where he's attacking some of those tight windows. And he seems like he's always been someone who's been more than happy to kind of sling that ball downfield. They have those young weapons that they're continuing to kind of grow together. And now we see really impressive throws from Jordan Love, whether it's that 3rd and 11 outbreaker against Derwin James against the Chargers. He hits that tight window touchdown throw against the Lions where it seems like receivers are going in a little bit of different direction. And then he rolls out to the right, throws it all the way across the field. I'm sure you and everyone in your house is just screaming interception, interception, interception. And I mean, I was stressed out about that just watching it, but he gets to different arm slots. He's happy to put the ball in positions that let your receiver make a play. Christian Watson, I think, continues to come along where after that first play against the Vikings last year, where he's wide open for a touchdown. To me, I just felt like, look, this guy is gonna be able to put it together, and it feels like he is able to do that. Now the Packers, Jordan Love together, kind of putting out good tape. So give us some thoughts on the Packers offense, maybe against that Lions defense, and maybe a little bit overall.
Mm. Yeah, I really like the point that you brought up with the connection between Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love right now. I think that there was some doubt about Matt LaFleur middle of the season when the offense was sputtering a little bit, but it was a lot of just the Packers having so many young players that maybe weren't all on the same page yet that are now all on the same page. And it does go back to those pure drop back rates that you were talking about. When you look at Jordan Love, he has the 6th lowest amount of pure dropbacks in the league. So that's no play action, no RPO, and no screens, like you mentioned. This is really good use of easing someone into the offense. You look at other quarterbacks who have low percent of pure dropback rates. Dak Prescott, Tua, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, like play callers that we've praised this year, quarterbacks that we've all said are playing well. And that's in a large part due to them having this opportunity. You look at the other end and quarterbacks with a high rate of pure dropbacks. It's Derek Carr, it's Bryce Young, Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, quarterbacks that we've said that are in less imaginative offenses and putting them in worse situations. So it really stems back to that. And Jordan Love is above average on plays where that, from an EPA standpoint, where there's no screens, no play action. And he's also above average when it comes to doing play action and doing screens. And I think when you have the combination of that, you can really lean into a lot of stuff. These past 4 weeks, he's 5th in EPA per play, 7th in success rate. On the season, he ranks 12th in EPA per play, and he has the 5th highest average depth of target in the league. So all these things together are coming together for Jordan Love right now. We're able to get above average production from a quarterback in a pretty well-designed and well play called offense.
Yeah, I go back and forth in my head when especially you do a great job, I think, putting together the pure drop back charts. And then we look at, how are quarterbacks doing with play action? How are they doing without play action? And football, we talk about it all the time. It's such a crazy, like, it's a small sample size because how many like super isolated examples do you have of it's 3rd and 8 and we know it's a drop back? Like, you don't have just tons of those over and over. So I guess I never fault quarterbacks for being in the offenses that they're in. Of course, now when you start to think about, well, would you put this quarterback in a different offense? That's just like a totally separate conversation. But hey, we're just watching these games week after week. So I like what's happening with Jordan Love in Green Bay. I think that like there were a few weeks ago where I'm sure Packers fans were maybe starting to rip their hair out a little bit. Now, I love that you mentioned the top 5 in ADOT, right? Like the defenses overall in the league, they're so hyper prioritizing. Stop the explosive pass play. We're gonna make you just check down over and over again. And that's obviously like you see teams do it to Mahomes. You see teams like constantly play 2 high shells against Josh Allen. I think Jalen Hurts, one of the few defenses that his numbers have like taken a hit against are those 2 high defenses, whether it's cover 4, cover 6, cover 8, whatever the kind of combination of it is. But if you have an offense that is able to manufacture those targets and almost artificially push up that ADOT, of course, Jordan Love is making those decisions and he is happy to push that ball downfield. But that's like, it's such a rare thing to me in a league where now the priority is, yeah, like those plays are not happening over and over again. So when you combine a play caller, combine a quarterback that's able to kind of attack that, it causes issues for a defense. And in that game specifically, I thought the Lions defense, we saw some of the holes in their defense that maybe have shown up the last few weeks. To me, a real big issue is that second pass rusher spot where maybe you thought that they could bring someone in at the deadline or something, and their man coverage reps that they love to get into, they don't look as good when the pressure doesn't get there. And maybe Aiden Hutchinson was just totally ripping it early in the season. Now offenses are adjusting and kind of pushing resources to him a little bit, make his life a little harder. And yeah, that leads to a few more conversions for the Packers. So how do you feel about the Lions defense a little bit in that game?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it is pretty clear that the Lions defense has regressed some, and we're probably playing above their actual level early in the season. Weeks 1 through 8, they were 8th in EPA per play allowed, 14th in success rate allowed, and 7th against the pass, 16th against the run. So, pretty good pass defense. I thought that the secondary was playing well. And then obviously, like you mentioned, you had Aiden Hutchinson and Elite McNeil holding down the defensive line. But now you're starting to see some cracks of not having that second edge rusher. They've put resources into that position between John Kaminsky and the Okwara brothers and Charles Harris. And none of it has seemed to materialize, which I'm not going to fault them for necessarily. I'm just looking at maybe it's a separate issue elsewhere. And now you're sitting in a situation where weeks 9 through 12, the last 4 weeks of the season, Lions are 32nd in EPA per play allowed, 32nd in success rate allowed, 32nd against the pass, but 12th against the run. So they've kind of flipped here where they're really, really bad against the pass now. And that really stems from just not being as good when they have their 4-2-5 set out there. So when they have 5 defensive backs on the field early in the season, they were dominating. And you thought about the plays that Brian Branch was making, and CJ Gardner-Johnson was still healthy, and Cam Sutton was playing at a high level as the free agent corner signing that they made. And now you're starting to see that without Gardner-Johnson, and Branch has been on and off with injuries, and Sutton has regressed some, that they've become one of the worst defenses when having 5 defensive backs on the field. And that's what the Packers formula was in this game on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the Packers were able to do that even, without Aaron Jones. Obviously, we see A.J. Dillon kind of a bowling ball through the air. It did seem like, the Lions, their linebackers, were playing kind of above their weight earlier in their season. I think the Packers were able to find spaces in the middle of the field. They were really able to just, stretch out Campbell a lot, I think, in different ways. High, low, left, right, like your horizontal stretches. So I think, he's a rookie linebacker. Of course, I think he's shown flashes over time. Things are going to get cleaned up. But yeah, they're not playing up to, I think, what they did in their first half of the season. And I think that the Packers defense almost had a reciprocal of the Lions defense, where to me, the Lions felt like, okay, your man coverage looks a little bit worse because your pass rush isn't getting there. And then on the opposite end, the Packers, it felt like their man coverage looks a lot better. Their fire zones look a lot better because their rush was, to me, pretty constant against the Lions offensive line that me and you both love so much. And I thought their offensive line for the Lions was good in the run game, and pass approaches felt like sometimes they were just straight up beat. And that makes everyone's life harder. I think Jared Goff, he had those 3 fumbles. Like, you're hopefully not going to see those every day without that kind of pressure. How'd you feel about that overall? I know not the most fun game for you to watch, but let's talk about Lions offense versus Packers defense there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the Lions' offensive issues that they've shown the past 2 weeks are obviously more fixable than the defensive issues. It really just stems from turnover luck and some of the issues that we've seen around the league right now in regards to defenses having a ton of turnovers or offenses having a ton of turnovers. And those things usually regress back to the mean. So I don't think it's fading the Lions' offense as much as we're probably doing the same to the Lions' defense right now, because a lot of it does stem from Jared Goff. But to see Rashawn Gary take over the game on Thursday and what he was able to do to the strong part of the Lions offensive line, which is the offensive tackles with Taylor Decker and Penny Sewell, was surprising. But that's the type of player that Rashawn Gary is, and that's the type of talent that he is. And I think that he was able to really do that in that game on Thanksgiving. And when you look at the Lions going forward, they have been a better run blocking unit than pass blocking unit these past couple seasons as they've had this type of offensive line. And I think you're starting to see more and more of that as now some of the offensive guards are starting to play banged up or get injured, where they are still able to run block really well because you can get Penny Sewell out in space, and Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow at center are really good run blockers. But when it comes to pass blocking, because you have a quarterback that doesn't scramble that often and was doing a good job of not taking sacks earlier in the season, but is starting to have some negative regression in that aspect, the pass blocking is going to be a little bit suspect for the Lions going forward. So, I think that they're going to continue to lean on this run game a lot. Even when they were down in this game, they had a negative pass rate over expected because they wanted to lean on that run game. They knew that their best path into the game was relying on David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs and some throws to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think that's going to continue to be the formula for the Lions as things start to get tighter for them here.
It feels like, again, that Ben Johnson, when he wants explosive plays, obviously he does a great job, I think, drawing up a lot of those shot plays, but he loves to lean into the run game, and that is such an explosive element to the offense. I'm glad you mentioned, Goff, whatever you think of him as a scrambler, and then you look across the other side where Jordan Love is, I think, able to play out of structure a lot more comfortably, and he makes that run on zone read toward the end for the Packers. The Lions played that, just cleaning stuff up there. Thought that Rodrigo at fullback, that was like a little fun thing for us to see. We were talking about, what if you take kind of one of your extra linebackers and use them at that fullback spot if you don't have another traditional spot there. That felt just like a nice one to throw in for all of us. They had a play of like 12 personnel empty, so you get 2 tight ends on the field, a running back. The defense is more likely than not going to stay in base personnel. They use that to get Amon-Ra St. Brown versus a linebacker. And God did have a bunch of tight window throws on crossers, whether it was to St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta had a great catch on a touchdown. So I agree with you. I think there's a lot of the fundamentals that are still there that you feel encouraged about the Lions. And you talk about a lot about turnover luck. I think that's an important thing to consider. Do you expect 3 fumbles? Probably not. And then do you expect all 3 to bounce the other way? Probably not. At the same time, my concern is that if you're a team that's constantly getting pressured, then you might be a little more likely to see those turnovers. So, Tish, I feel like I put you on the spot a lot here. And we don't usually do this. I just want to talk about the games. We don't have to preview. We don't have to look forward. But think about the next 3 years. All right. So we got a 3-year window here between the Lions and the Packers, where it felt like earlier in the season where I was texting you like, hey, Tish, have you ever spent time in your life where the Lions are just owning the Packers? So you're going to have to choose one here between the Lions and the Packers over the next 3 years. Give us some thoughts and tell us where you land.
Yeah, this is a great question. This is a really interesting point to bring up, because when you look at like this fountain of youth that the Packers have on offense right now, Jordan Love is 25 years old, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed are all 24 or younger. You're talking about someone in Jaden Reed who leads the team in receiving yards, 35th in yards per run out of 100 receivers. Dontavian Wicks has really come along these past couple of weeks. He leads the team in yards per run and on a smaller sample. And then you have your tight ends and running backs, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, who are 23 years old, AJ Dillon, who are 25 years old. So like all the Packers skill positions, including their quarterback, are really young. I think that's really exciting. But I look to the offensive line. I still have some questions about the Packers offensive line. And I think that their defense is still, something that kind of goes up and down based on the opposing offenses they're playing. I see the Lions as a team that has their offensive line locked in for the next couple of years, has their defensive line for the most part locked in for the next couple of years, and has a receiver in St. Brown that can really take over games. So I lean Lions here for the next 3 years, but I'm curious to hear kind of where you're leaning on that side of things.
Yeah, I'm just setting in my calendar November 28th, 2026. I'm excited to check back in on this one. Obviously, when you think of the Lions, right? So next year they're more likely than not going to lose Ben Johnson to a head coaching job. I think that's that's a fair thing to say. They have to figure out what's kind of going on at that quarterback position. Is it, find another way to get another year out of Jared Goff? Is it turning over to kind of the next person? And I guess those things are big concerns for me. I love that the Packers have young weapons. I'm a believer in LaFleur. I love your points on the Packers offensive line and the things in their defense where even if the Lions defense isn't playing up to expectation right now, there are elements to that defense, especially Hutchinson, where you can kind of build different things. And obviously, parts of the Packers defense looks really good on one day, and then they have injuries here. Obviously, love Jair Alexander. I'm sure he'll get back to full health. Oh man, I'll just say Packers, just I guess for the fun of it. I don't think I have a good feel either way on it, and it's just such a reminder, like how quickly football changes. Whether it's, we'll talk about the Texans and Jaguars next, where you bring in a quarterback and things change, or a player gets hurt and things change. You lose a coach and things change. I guess I'm always worried about teams that you have attrition at the coaching spots, where if Ben Johnson leaves and he takes 4 or 5 guys from the Lions, and that kind of muddies things up a little bit. But again, November 28th, 2026, Tage, expect a text from me, not too early in the morning. I would never do that to you. But let's get to the Jaguars-Texans game. I think we'll go Jaguars offense first. I'm just so happy to see this matchup, AFC South, where we spent time during our life where the division maybe isn't the best division in football, and to have Lawrence and Stroud, then obviously hopefully Richardson there in that division in the future. On the Jaguar side, I've loved that over the last few weeks, it feels like Trevor Lawrence has, I know he has, just looking at the numbers, he's increased his average depth of target. There's just so many high-level throws, whether it's a ball buzzing past a linebacker to Evan Ingram earlier in the game. He throws like a kind of like a fadeaway to Christian Kirk, and he's able to get to all these different arm angles. And seeing Calvin Ridley just used in a few different ways where I think people were reasonably frustrated, where he was kind of thrown on the boundary. He was the X receiver, just running a lot of run-off types of plays. Now getting him in different spots, having him breaking in across the middle of the field in different ways. I like that the Jaguars, they wanted to get to their boot game from double tight end sets, where now, and that's the close side of your offense. Now the cornerback is kind of the edge of the defense on that outside tight end. A lot of the times you can manipulate things a little bit if the inside tight end releases, and it just, makes life hard on a defense in a few different ways. Whenever I break down Jaguars film, I'm always kind of surprised. Like, they throw so many of those advantage throws where it's just like a quick pass attached to a run if they have numbers on the perimeter. But then the Jaguars, they'll really heavily lean into that 4-strong play to Travis Etienne, where he's motioning to a 3 receiver side. And they did something I liked, where they have the inside receiver on that 3 receiver side kind of loop all the way out and block the outside defender, and the other 2 receivers blocking down. It almost like becomes like a crack toss kind of on the edge. And the Texans, I think they would prefer to sit in too high and get into a lot of their fancier looks. Jaguars were able to get into some heavier personnel, invite that one high. That helped them get to some different shots. So a fun game overall. I think we both had a good time watching it. How'd you feel overall, Jags offense versus Texans defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great game to watch. I think Eric had a really good point on the Monday show about like how this was a game where it was like a Thursday night throwaway game 2 years ago where no one wanted to watch it, and now it's like this premier game of that early slate for basically the division, which was like awesome to watch. And I thought both quarterbacks played at such a high level, starting with Trevor Lawrence, and to your point about the heavier personnel to get play action out of. The Jaguars were in 11 personnel 60% of the time in this game and had a pass rate of 60% out of 11 personnel. When they were in 12 personnel, so with one running back, 2 tight ends on the field, they had a pass rate of 59%, and they were in that 29% of the time. So you could see that usually teams run more when they're in 12 personnel. It makes sense. You have 2 tight ends on the field. But the Jaguars wanted to get into 12 personnel to pass out of in this game. And it was a large part due to not being able to run the ball that effectively. They had an 8th percentile EPA per rush in this game. I thought that, it was a tougher game from Travis Etienne from a running perspective. Dearness Johnson also didn't have a great day running the ball. But when you had Trevor Lawrence throwing to Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk as well as he was doing, I think that was super meaningful for this offense. And Calvin Ridley had 0 receptions at halftime. He had the one drop early in the game. And then after that, the second half was basically his game to take over. And he did take advantage of that. And you're really starting to see when you have these types of games with the Jaguars offense where it's all really coming together, even despite 2 plays where they had the first and goal That was the last play of the first half that they didn't convert the touchdown. And then they had a missed pass interference that led to an interception. Like they were able to overcome that to score the 24 points in this game. And I thought that was really meaningful to see from the Jaguars.
Yeah, on that. So last play of the first half, the Jaguars get it kind of all the way down to inside the 5 yard line, and then they just run that kind of quick pitch. Maybe they're faking like a quarterback sneak. Are you going for the touchdown there? You kicking a field goal there? For you, was it just like a hey, maybe call a different play? What were your thoughts kind of on that play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the math would say to go for the touchdown there because you've around 57-58% chance to convert that for the 7 points versus kicking the basically automatic field goal. So you would see an expected points of 3.5 plus to go for that there. I didn't like the play call though. I thought you should have put that in the hands of Trevor Lawrence or even do the quarterback sneak that we saw from him earlier in the game. Was that kind of the similar thought that you were seeing when you watched that play?
Yeah, I feel like I'm usually like fine with whatever the offense kind of puts out because it is so execution based. It's so much
Mm-hmm.
like once you see Lawrence run the line, to me the immediate thought is okay, he's actually going to pitch it out. They're not going to kind of get heavy in there. I agree with you. I feel like the Jaguars have been so unlucky this year where they need an 11-yard end zone, whether it's kind of a ball getting over to a receiver and it just ends up with them stepping out. But then later in the game, you see two consecutive plays where Calvin Ridley had that octopus where he scores the touchdown, gets the two-point conversion, where he's just so good releasing off the line. He really makes life hard on cornerbacks, especially if they're trying to switch on the goal line, where coverage really becomes man coverage. So yeah, I would like to see something there, whether it's just like switch release vertical so that you can obviously cut inside because you're not going to run down the field. So I think it's easy to criticize the play call when it works, if or when it doesn't work. If it works, we think everyone's a genius, and someone who feels like a genius, CJ Stroud, just like a physical genius, where the way he moves in the pocket has been so cool to watch. Where I don't think you see a lot of young quarterbacks be able to do that. And something that's kind of I think interesting about the Shanahan system is they don't really have the quarterback reset the protection call. So to me, that allows the quarterback to play faster, where all the route concepts really have their hots built into it. I do think sometimes that means that the defense can, generate blitz pressure in a few different ways. But you're usually not going to see CJ Stroud kind of walk up to the center from shotgun, repoint out the mic, or change a bunch of things because they're like a set it and forget it type of team. And again, I like that allows younger quarterbacks to play quicker. And he can just erase blitzers with his legs in a lot of ways. Now, you don't want CJ Stroud to constantly be under pressure, where I feel like the Jaguars defense did a really good job in a lot of ways. But just on the defensive end, if you're playing man coverage, if you're playing zone, whenever Stroud's able to break the pocket and just continue to increase those seconds you need to cover, it's really hard to keep track of receivers. Receivers are really good at it. Teams understand that the scramble drill is something that they have to practice. On the goal line, Stroud had that awesome one where, of course, a linebacker is going to want to step up because you're not going to just let CJ Stroud step into the end zone. If he runs it in, you'll lose track of a receiver. That ends up in a touchdown. So how do you feel about watching CJ Stroud and then the Texans offense a little bit overall against the Jaguars defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was great to watch CJ Stroud again in this game. And early in the game, it kind of looked like it was getting away from the Texans a little bit. And you kind of had to remind yourself that this was the team that was picking number 2 overall. Right now, they are basically playing with house money in regards to what they are doing and even being in playoff contention. But Stroud, I thought, played a great game, even if it didn't end up showing in the stats. But you can just keep seeing that the Texans not having a true wide receiver one is not a major detriment on the offense because they find so many ways to get into different players having big games. And I think that's a testament to both Stroud and offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick. You've had Tank Dell games and Noah Brown games even, and Dalton Schultz games and Nico Collins games. And they do just such a good job of spreading the ball around and being explosive out of that. They had a 15.5% rate of explosive plays in this game, which was 89th percentile. They had a plus 7.9 pass rate over expected, which was 85th percentile. So they're passing a lot. They're able to be explosive about it. Their most explosive play of the day was wiped away by an iffy illegal motion penalty, but I think that they just continue to show that they can answer these challenges. The Jaguars defense is really good. And I think with a defensive line that's playing as well as it is, led by Josh Allen and all the resources that they put into that, and then Foyesade Aluakon playing as one of the best linebackers in the league this year, that they've been able to stop a lot of offenses along the way. And the only thing that's really messed with them is when teams have 2 backs out on the field. And so that could be a running back fullback, or, maybe two running backs. And that's what the Texans were kind of built to do in this game, having Andrew Beck, who ended up playing 13 snaps in this game. And when he was on the field, the Texans had a plus 0.2 EPA per play. When he was off the field, it was negative 0.01. So they were slightly below average without him on the field, and with him on the field, they were positive. And, if we're lucky enough to maybe see this game as a rematch in the playoffs, I can see the Texans really leaning into that 21 personnel, 22 personnel type looks, because they were successful out of that in this game. It just, they struggled when they had the 11 personnel, 4 receivers out on the field.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job a few times mentioning the offensive personnel, how the defense matches it, and just thinking about it a little bit simpler. I think defenses, they want to match like bodies against like bodies. So if the offense puts out 5 receivers, you're not going to have 6 linebackers on the field. That doesn't make sense as a defense. The most common is offense is going to be an 11 personnel, defense is going to be a nickel look, and then it's just, you see it less across the league when the offense has 2 running backs, has 1 tight end or 2 tight ends on the field. So but the Jaguars they love playing base. Like they like, I think, being in that 3-4. I agree with you. I think Josh Allen played an awesome game. They had one snap where I think it was a Lucan who from the linebacker spot is kind of he's part of a pick for Josh Allen. And I think I'm just obsessed with TE stunts where the end is looping inside. I just feel like I've seen it kind of across the league a little bit more this year, where teams are really effective with it. And I'm excited, as you said, are the Texans going to be able to add just a super stud number 1 receiver into that room? I think that would really explode things even more. So, okay, Jags Texans is a fun one, because we did the next 3 years for Packers Lions, where also, just a side note, I think Packers, we have them as a 50 or close to 60% chance to make the playoffs. That'll be interesting to see through the stretch run. But next 3 years, we didn't prepare this one. Jags Texans. You got any thoughts, or is it just hey, you'd be blessed to be either one of these 2 teams?
They're both in a good spot for sure. I think that the Jaguars really have one main issue with their team right now. It's offensive line. I think that they have put some resources into it last offseason. They're going to continue to do that. And so I like their future better, because the pass catchers room is in a great spot. The front 7 of the defense is in a really good spot. I think once they shore up their offensive line, they're going to be good. But Texans are also in a really good spot. It's what you mentioned with getting that number 1 receiver, which is a difficult thing to do, not having a high draft pick, but it's doable. But then also the secondary in this game from the Texans, they played well at times, but they were undisciplined for most of the game, drawing a decent amount of pass interferences. And so I think there's more work to do with the roster there. But I think you have to love both of these futures, like you said. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, that was a good kind of thought there. I feel usually, I think we may have talked about it last week, where the rise for a team is so much more fun. So you would, from a standpoint, it's in the NBA draft when you have a lottery pick, you're what's going to be behind the door? You never know what it is. And so the Texans are obviously they're on an earlier part of the roller coaster, where the Jaguars, I feel are trying to find their way kind of over the top there. I do lean the Jaguars as well. I think the world of CJ Stroud. Trevor Lawrence, I think, is further ahead than him. That I don't think is controversial to say in any way. I hope Stroud just continues to grow and grow and grow. I agree with you that there's going to be a bunch of moves that they're going to need to make on the roster. At the same time, D'Amico Ryan's doing an awesome job. I think, of course, really head coach's job in so many ways is to get the most out of whatever players are on that roster, and he is absolutely doing that. So we could wake up in 3 years when I send you that text about Lions Packers and be talking about how the Texans defense is one of the best defenses there is. And Tish, I feel you mentioned offensive line when we go in both of the 3-year look aheads. Is that you're a big offensive line guy, huh?
Well, so we've been working on a little bit of an offensive line project that hopefully can kind of be released soon in regards to the tracking data. But I think it's more of just if I were team building, and I think we've talked about this before, but I think I would start with focusing on the offensive line, just because once you have that locked down, it's so much easier to evaluate the rest of your roster. When you think about quarterbacks that people have been iffy on going into season end to season end +1, the common excuse they'll give to that quarterback is, oh, his offensive line isn't that good. We don't know what we can see out of him, or we don't know about our pass catchers yet because the offensive line hasn't given the quarterback much time to throw to him. So once you get that offensive line locked in, I feel once you put resources into that, we know the hit rate of first round offensive tackles, and you can sign guards through free agency, and you can get the center through the draft or free agency. Like I think it becomes a lot easier to evaluate the rest of your team and feel better about the rest of your roster.
I think those are great points. And, two teams that I think did a great job figuring out different ways to make, you have to be able to evaluate your quarterback. Of course, the Bills and the Eagles. The Bills, when they get Stephon Diggs, the Eagles have, I think, just an incredible infrastructure where, to me, they're the best offensive line in the league. This game was awesome. It was stressful. It was a lot of fun to kind of talk through. We'll go. I think we'll go Bills offense first, just because another example of Josh Allen just really going nuclear at so many points of the game, whether it's those third downs where the Eagles offense or the Eagles defense was able to succeed up front, with Jordan Davis having an awesome day, Jalen Carter just looking really, really good again. And they're able to stop some of those first down runs, those second down runs earlier in the game. And that ball is in Josh Allen's hands. And if he's able to convert it, they're able to roll. And he was, and they were. So he had an awesome cover two hole shot. So I think it was Khalil Shakir, where usually against cover two, if you're to a two receiver side, a lot of teams, they'll run their inside receiver just on a quick out, and then their outside receiver on a vertical. And, the cornerback has to make a decision. Am I going to trap this kind of 5-and-out route? Am I going to carry that vertical? They run it a ton. The Bengals, they had to play on defense where the cornerback kept tracking that vertical route and ended up with an interception. In this game, the Bills ran something nice where, like, from that kind of same look, the inside receiver sort of runs a wheel, and the outside receiver runs like a switch release curl route. So it just makes life so hard on the cornerback. And the ball that Allen is able to throw is faster than any of the safeties on the Eagles. So that was really, really fun to watch. And then at the same time, James Bradbury comes up late with that interception where he's a cover two corner. And I think he felt that Diggs was lined up and pretty much across from a linebacker. He thought that Allen was pretty confidently going to take that matchup because he takes Stephon Diggs when he's lined up across from a linebacker. So maybe he was a little bit extra kind of hungry to get that and makes an awesome play, attacks it almost before that Allen even loads up to get the ball on that interception. Obviously, that Gabe Davis, the last play, offensive play for the Bills in overtime, that one, I know we talked back and forth about. I think I'm going to watch it a few more times. I feel like I actually put a little bit more of the blame on Allen than Davis to me. So they're in like a two receiver against two defender look. The defense ends up bringing a pressure, and the cornerback switched the routes off to each other. So now Gabe Davis, he's running away from leverage, which again, to me, that felt like the right thing to do, where the cornerback is now inside of you. To me, it makes a little bit less sense to continue to work kind of up or across the field, because why would we bring that cornerback back into the field? But at the same time, that could obviously be wrong, where the expectation is that you break across the middle of the field when there's no safety. But that's like another kind of tick for Shawn Desai, where you don't get that kind of result unless you're sending a pressure and trying to speed things up. So just a really, really fun game, I think, from that end, where Josh Allen, again, just feels like sometimes it's just rough luck in overtime, where we set the rules in overtime based on that 13 seconds Chiefs game, and then things just go south here and there. So how'd you feel about Bills offense versus Eagles defense in that one?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up that Gabe Davis play at the end there, because I wasn't sure who to put, some of the blame on, or kind of whose fault it was for that, because Josh Allen played a great game in this game, but maybe it wasn't, you can't call it a flawless game because of the one interception and because of maybe that miscommunication at the end there. But like, when you look at Josh Allen and what he's able to do, especially on late downs and expected pass situations, and how he was able to continually churn those out in this game. He only took 1 sack for 7 yards in this entire game. Was pressured a decent amount by the Eagles' really strong defensive line. And I think that made a big impact in him scrambling for a lot of first downs in this game. And then also what he was able to do from a pass perspective, converting a lot of these late downs as well. Josh Allen leads the NFL in rush EPA right now among all players. He's doing a phenomenal job of running the ball. And then on top of that, I still think that his passing is at a really good level. So when you have a quarterback that can effectively scramble, and he is also avoiding sacks at the second best rate in the league, only behind Patrick Mahomes, that's going to be a recipe for running games for a lot of teams. For the Bills, unfortunately, they keep losing a lot of these games where they're having these situations. And so now the Bills sit at 6-6 here, where they are on the outside looking in at the playoffs and using 10,000 simulations of the rest of the season. If they finish at 10 wins, they have a 57% chance of making the playoffs. If they finish at 11 wins, they have a 97.5% chance of making the playoffs. 9 wins and they're basically out. It'll only be an 8% chance of making the playoffs. So if they get to 10 wins, they're going to have a coin flip or better chance to get in. 11 wins gets them in, but it's asking a lot of this team, especially with the toughest schedule in the league the rest of the season.
Yeah, the rest of the way they're on the bye week in week 13. They have Kansas City. They go to Kansas City, home for Dallas, in Los Angeles, home for New England, and then in Miami. So yeah, that is that's a rough stretch of games where it's so frustrating because the Bills' offense is one of the best offenses in the league. Really, no matter what anyone tells me, no matter what happens, like you just never feel comfortable going against Josh Allen. They have the fundamentals of it. They're able to attack in the run game. They can get into heavy personnel, and I feel like I'm just like sweating thinking about, man, like they just keep on playing so well, but not being able to come away with wins. Just cleaning some stuff up for the Eagles defense. I actually thought this was one of their better pass defense games in terms of coverage, which Bradbury had a bunch of nice plays. Slay had a bunch of nice plays. And it's always funny. Like I thought that they had a great game plan, even when CeeDee Lamb had like almost 200 yards. I thought they did a good job on defense when they let up something like 500 yards, just from a coverage, like sticking to receivers standpoint. I think maybe it was just that they did a better job against the Bills than some of their other games. And Desai ripped out a few new things where he hasn't had any snaps where he really like just starts in a clear one high man look and pops out into cover 2 in a specific way. And he showed that. So it was fun to see, his menu is just so big, I think. And I love that. Just obviously the Eagles are a team we expect to be playing in the playoffs. I think it would be incredibly weird if they didn't end up in the playoffs. So that was fun to see. And then, all right, we got to talk about the Eagles offense because Tej, I'm working on this theory, right? So when we think about like the Eagles offense in this game, it seemed like they were just like totally off in the first half outside of one drive. They obviously have more success in the second half. And then when you look at just like numbers overall, the highest success rate teams are usually right at like 50%. And then even if you want to think about it from a drive level, so we use Eckel percentage just to kind of measure like how many quality drives did you have? I think the 49ers are first at something around 60%. But if you have a 50% quality drive that gets you into likely field goal range, that again, 50% gets you into the top 10. So I don't know, Tej, maybe this is just me like coping with what the Eagles offense does to us on a week-to-week basis. But it feels like in baseball, you understand if you get 1 out of 3 hits, you're doing a great job. And then in offense, we expect all of you to score every single time. Where if you have 10 possessions and you score a touchdown on 5 of them, 35 points. That's like a high scoring game in the NFL. So, Tej, how do you feel about my 50% theory where like if your offense is succeeding 50% of the time, you're actually like by numbers wise, like the top offense in the league? Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me how I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm just like, if this is just me finding ways to deal with the Eagles' slow starts.
No, I mean, I do agree with you. I think that when you look at, so for those who don't know, like, success rate is defined in a couple different ways, but the most common definition, the definition that we use on sumersports.com, is the rate of plays that increase your chance of scoring. So when we use our expected points added model, we are looking at the amount of plays that have increased your chance of scoring divided by your total plays, like that have generated a positive expected points added or EPA on that play. And so when you think about the way that expected points is modeled, and you think about how different types of plays can increase your chance of scoring, if you're sitting at a 1st and 10 at the -25 and you have a 10-yard gain, that increases your chance of scoring a decent amount. If you have a 40-yard gain, that also increases your chance of scoring to a greater amount than that 10-yard gain that we just talked about. But from a success rate standpoint, they are still labeled as the same successful type play. So when we're modeling expected points added plays, only 43% of them are considered successful plays because expected points added has that long right tail of distribution where you can have anything from a plus 0.01 expected points added all the way up to a plus 6.9 depending on where you are on the field. And so that's why the model is only seeing plays with positive expected points added as this really long type of distribution. And so that's why you get this 43% average of success rate for plays. So when you look at a team and they're sitting at 50% success rate, like you mentioned, like that's a really good offense, because that means that 50% of the time they're increasing their chance of scoring. And then usually when you factor in explosiveness, that means that they're top of the league in offense, because those 50% of plays that are increasing chance of scoring could range anywhere from plus 0.01 to plus 6.9, like I mentioned. So I do like your theory and that long-winded way to explain it there.
So, and a 50% grade, like it puts you number one in the NFL. That's like a very clear F on your test. I think no matter what state that you're in, right? That's not good. So it makes sense that you would feel bad as if you're a fan, if you're watching the team, and say, okay, before this game, half of their snaps are going to feel like a failure, and that's, I think, frustrating. But I do think the Bills defense did a nice job. Tej, thanks for entertaining me my nonsense on that 50% theory. We'll workshop it offline, but got to get back to the Bills. I thought they had a good game plan on defense. They played a lot of cover two early on. They kind of had like that mush rush where teams are doing this to Hurts, and they probably should, where like you're not just attacking up the field, you're really compressing that pocket and really prepared if he kind of breaks the pocket or rolls out in any way. It felt like their zone coverage really did a good job keying on AJ Brown in different ways. And we talked about it, how defenses want to keep put a dome over the offense, keep them in front of you, force the check down. They did that kind of early and often. And the Eagles came into this game without Dallas Goedert. Lane Johnson was a surprise scratch. So early on, I thought the Bills were able to expose that right tackle problem a little bit. Eagles seemed like they solved it a little bit later on. Just like so many examples now of them, instead of worrying about the right side, the Eagles in the second half running to the left a lot more. We get those awesome examples of Jason Kelce pulling, where it's so unique as a center to be able to do that. I think it just sets them up in so many different ways, where a lot of times it just doesn't matter what you line up in as a defense. They're able to attack where they want to get to, particularly because they can pin down with that left guard. They can pull Kelce all the way around. So that was really fun. I think that their RPO game has just continued to improve. We saw that awesome touchdown where it's like AJ Brown is like setting a pick and then kind of rolling to the outside. You get the little pick and roll action where the quarterback has the ability to keep the ball. There's obviously the handoff fake there. Maybe there's a tight end on that slide route. Now that almost like a fourth option in that deeper route. And they were able to get to some more Devontae Smith crossers in later in the game. Jalen Hurts had an awesome rollout to Olamide Zaccheaus, and just like another wow, the Eagles find a way to win games. Or it feels like I think this year you do a great job with the tweets of, Vikings in 2022 had X record in one-score games, and then this year they're a lot worse. You hope that the Eagles don't regress there. But do you have got any other thoughts, kind of Eagles offense versus Bills defense, and how my Jalen Hurts is playing like an MVP article is looking now?
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts is still the MVP favorite on the betting market, so I would say that it's looking good. I hope some people tailed you on that pick for sure, but I think so. The interesting thing about the Eagles is they are winning a lot of one-score games. Their point differential, doesn't necessarily match their win total, but when you look at the Eagles, and again, we're going to find out over these next couple of weeks if this is more variance or if this is how the Eagles are built. But there is no team that is better than playing when trailing than the Eagles in the entire league. And there's no team that even comes close. So, in situations where the Eagles are losing the game, they have a 0.28 EPA per play, which would be the highest offense in the league. And it is in this specific situation. Baltimore is in second place at 0.14. Buffalo is in third place at 0.13. So the Eagles are double what second place is when it comes to EPA per play when trailing. And then a lot of that rests on Jalen Hurts, who has a 0.43 EPA per play when trailing on his 155 plays that he's had, losing this year. And again, that's almost double what Lamar Jackson is. CJ Stroud is third. Brock Purdy is fourth on that list. And he is double what those quarterbacks are. So I don't know, again, if this is a lot of noise that's happening and maybe they end up regressing. And I would assume so that they do. It's very hard to be double the league in anything. But when it comes to playing when losing, the Eagles have done a great job of that when we see other teams have a negative EPA when it comes to that sense. And it goes back to some of the 10 personnel stuff that we talked about last week, where they don't have Dallas Goedert. They don't seem to trust their backup tight ends as much, which is perfectly reasonable. And I think the Eagles have found something here with their 10 personnel, where they've had not only AJ Brown and Devontae Smith on the field as they always do, but mixing in Zacchaeus and Julio Jones and some of the other receivers that they have there. And Zacchaeus, like you mentioned, obviously made that great touchdown catch. They've had a 0.2 EPA per play out of 10 personnel these past 2 weeks. They played 0 snaps of 10 personnel before these last 2 weeks. It's been 30 snaps of it in these past 2 weeks, and they've been the 4th best offense out of it in the entire league. So when you're looking at these one running back, 0 tight end, 4 wide receiver sets, like I think the Eagles have a new package that they can kind of use when it comes to playoff time that teams might not be as much prepared for, even when they get Dallas Goedert back.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much that 10 personnel, of course, stays. But Dallas Goedert has, I think, a chance to be able to play this upcoming week against the Niners. Certainly expect him back, or likely expect him back against the Cowboys the following week. The second half, Steph, it just doesn't make sense to me, because even when I'm watching the offense, it feels like, okay, in the second half, they really, really leaned into, we're going to run the ball more to the left side of our offensive line, which right now is stronger than the right side. So sometimes it seems like, I don't know, they just like simplify it a bit in the 2nd half, whether it's in some games, like they'll just attack AJ Brown more, where they'll take a bit to kind of get there. I think that they maybe expected the Bills to blitz from some of those looks a little bit more earlier in the game, where how many 3-and-outs in a row do we see for the Eagles? And is it sustainable? Like, I don't know, is it like the 49ers saying, okay, well, they're better from playing behind, like, let's just, let them take the lead in the first half. Maybe if you're an Eagles fan, that's what you tell the 49ers to do. But I am really curious to see, how much of that is able to carry over, not just on a week-to-week basis. Like, really, to me, for the Eagles, it almost just matters, like, well, what are you going to do in the playoffs? So you hope that as an Eagles fan, if you are an Eagles fan, like that they are able to jump on those teams right away, where like this game against the 49ers, Tish, I know you talk about game of the year like every single week, and you get another one where you get to talk about this. I'm sure we're gonna text back and forth about this one. I guess I haven't spent too much time kind of thinking about the matchup. Obviously, go back and watch that game again from last year. You got any kind of, what are your general vibes going into Eagles 49ers?
Yeah, I mean, I saw some people surprised that the 49ers were 2.5-point favorites on the road against the Eagles, but I do think that that's justified. Like, again, when you go back and you look at point differential, you look at the difference between Brock Purdy's EPA per play versus Jalen Hurts' EPA per play, and both have played well this year and have been very productive in their offenses. Like, I can definitely see why the 49ers are favored. And we go back to that game last year, where even before the Brock Purdy injury, the Eagles convert that 4th and 4 Devontae Smith circus catch that I think ended up not being a catch, but they ruled it on the field that. And we're able to score on that drive. And then the 49ers offensive line had a lot of trouble with the Eagles defensive line, even with Brock Purdy in the game. So that is the Eagles' path to win this game, is to just create havoc with their defensive line. But I think right now, with everyone healthy on the 49ers offense, where you have your offensive line healthy, led by Trent Williams, you have your pass catchers all playing at a high level with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and obviously Christian McCaffrey. And like, I think it's going to be very hard to stop this 49ers pass game with like some of the injuries that the Eagles have had in the secondary. And I can see the 49ers defensive line making their own havoc on their end as well. So I lean 49ers in this game, but again, I'm very excited for it. Like you mentioned, where do you kind of see this game playing out?
Yeah, I think the 49ers are the best team in the league right now. That's my personal feeling. I'm happy to be wrong if it changes. Even in their 3 losses, in 2 of them, they had like 90th percentile success rates against the Bengals and the Vikings. And then the Browns, that success rate was pretty far down. Which Browns like seem like sometimes they have a historical defense. We'll give them a pass on that one. I think that Purdy is actually playing at a high level, and as you said, when the 49ers have all of their passing options, they have Trent Williams healthy, they're just really unstoppable. Where Shanahan's one of the few people that is able to consistently access that golden middle of the field area over and over. I like that you mentioned the Eagles defensive line. Potentially, they want to create havoc against the 49ers offensive line. I think the Eagles are going to have to play a ton of base, especially when the 49ers are in 21 personnel. They love doing that. You want to get big bodies against big bodies. The Eagles, Zach Cunningham just got hurt. not sure what his injury status is. They've lost a few defensive linemen on the interior, so they're just off a game where their defensive line played like 92 snaps or something. Like I think it was
Yeah.
95 in total, including extra points and stuff. Where that you hope that they're able to turn it over really, really quick, because like this is like such a big game for the 49ers. Obviously, you know, however much you read into like press clippings and everything, like the 49ers guys and the Eagles guys seem like they have like unfinished business from the last game. But I can't wait until we come back here next week and talk about game of the year once again. We'll see if the Eagles are able to kind of pull it off in the second half. Any other closing thoughts before we head on out of here?
Yeah, I mean, this was fun as always. Like, you know, we got some really good feedback, you know, from an actual coach this week that, you know, is hopefully helping us do this podcast here. So like, you know, any feedback, good or bad, that you have for us, like, please send it our way. Like, I got, like, this isn't our full-time job, so, you know, we have other stuff to do at Sumer, but this is something that we enjoy doing. So we enjoy all of, you know, the feedback from everyone. So, you know, I've appreciated everyone that's been listening so far and that's been reviewing and commenting in the YouTube and everything. It's definitely been very helpful.
Yeah, it means a lot, everyone. Again, appreciate everyone listening to another episode of Stats and Scheme. Like Tage said, keep that feedback coming. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. And if you think I'll remember to text Tage in 3 years from today, November 28th, 2026, we'll see Lions versus Packers and Texans versus Jaguars. Make sure everyone takes a listen to that episode from Monday between Thomas and Eric. Those guys are just awesome. Love listening to them. I think everyone is able to learn something from them. Make sure you listen or take a visit to sumersports.com. You know, give my 50% theory a try. Run the numbers. Look at what you think. If an offense is succeeding at 50% of the time, where they rank in the NFL, especially as playoff time comes up. Make sure you look at those team tables, and everyone enjoy the rest of your week.